Hello, this is Nina. Welcome to NVfineARTstudio. When you think about painting a seascape or urban environment with boats and trying to analyze how to tackle it, it can get overwhelming very quickly. If you want to develop confidence in painting a believable seascape, it is a good idea to practice painting its elements first. Today I would like to show you how to paint one of the most important elements of a seascape, boats. One might argue, if I cannot paint boats, I will just exclude them from the scene. But boats, the same as people, are like actors on a stage. You have to include something. No one is interested in coming to a theater and looking at an empty stage, no matter how beautiful it is. So, today I want to show you how to paint two types of boats, a small sailboat and canal boat. Very similar boats will be part of the full demonstration on Patreon for the masterclass this week and for the creative tier next week. Just a little spoiler, we will be painting Venice, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Don't forget, it's one thing to practice drawing an element on its own, it's another as part of a larger scene. You need to think about how to seamlessly incorporate it into the scene, so that it's not alien to surroundings, but at the same time attracts enough attention. I will show where and how to lose edges, how to use tonal values to create depth and atmosphere, and how to use colors to dictate the mood. I will tell you what water-to-pigment ratio to use, how to make good clean washes and use your brush to avoid overworking your painting, and so much more. So, if you want to take these skills we are working on today to the next level, please find me on Patreon. Without further ado, let's begin. First, I'm going to paint a sailboat. You should always start your painting with a sketch. Sketch is the backbone of your painting. The most important part is to keep an eye on the perspective and proportions, but at the same time don't be too careful with the sketch. Don't add any unnecessary details, as this will prevent you from being loose. Try not to use rulers or any other type of assistance to make perfect straight lines. They usually look odd in the painting. That's the sketch. I literally spent a minute drawing it. It shouldn't take longer than that. To paint this boat, I will use these two brushes. And I'm going to start with the mop. I'm going to do the sail first, as it's the lightest part of the boat. I'm preparing a very watery 70-30 water-to-pigment ratio mixture and very light in value. I'm using lavender, yellow ochre and buff titanium. Basically, I'm just making the water dirty to get rid of the whiteness of the paper and prevent the sail in some areas. To make it look white, first we need to add warm shadows. So I'm adding yellow ochre, and then while everything is still wet, I will add cool shadows. I will be using lavender for this. But first I will reduce the amount of moisture we have on the paper and will change the brush to be more precise with the application of the cooler shadows. I'm trying to apply lavender to the lower parts of these brush marks, imitating folds on the sail. Now I am going to add the mast. I'm preparing a very dark and thick mixture, very little water in there, and I'm painting in between the wet parts of sail, slightly touching some of them. This will create connections and unity in the painting. The sail is done, now it's time to paint the boat. It's quite typical for boats to have stripes. I'm choosing an orange stripe and I will use yellow ochre and burnt sienna for this. As you noticed, I'm using the same brush and I'm using a very thick mixture. It's very important not to make a continuous straight line when you're making this stripe. Continuous lines tend to divide painting in parts. While the stripe is still wet, I need to paint the rest of the boat, so there is a bit of a bleed from the orange stripe into the boat. I am making a 50-50 water-to-pigment ratio mixture. We will need this to be quite watery, and I am using mostly buff titanium. Very quickly, single brush stroke. Try not to fidget here, it will show. Now, very quickly, while this is still wet, I will add cool shadow to the lower part of the boat. I'm using lavender. Now we need to go very dark to show the depth under the boat. I'm preparing a thick and dark mixture so it doesn't bleed too much of neutral tint, burnt sienna, violet and ultramarine, and applying it right under the boat. Now it's time for the reflection. You actually have to be quite quick when making a mix for the reflection. We need this area to be still wet when we start painting the reflection, so it blends together without a dry edge in between the boat and the water. When you paint reflection, the most important part is to follow the shape of the boat and make decisive brush marks. If you made a mark, you cannot do much about it anymore. Just leave it as is. Any fidgeting with the reflection will result in an overworked look. Just a few drops of cadmium red light to reflect the stripe and neutral tint lines for the ropes, and the boat is finished. Now let's paint a few canal boats. The process will be very similar, but when we do the sketch, we will have to be very careful with the perspective. We will need to achieve the look that we are looking down at the boat. To do so, make sure that the top part of the boat is quite wide and elliptical. Some prefer to refer to number 8 when they sketch this shape. But I never believed in shortcuts. If you want to do it properly and you don't want your paintings to be always off, you better learn how to use the extended arm and pencil to measure the angles of the lines. I'm not going to do it here, I'm just imagining these two boats. I don't have any reference. Also, remember, you don't need to be very careful with the details and straightness of the lines. If you do too much drawing, it will prevent you from being loose. For this sketch, I will be using a very similar set of brushes, a medium-sized mop, medium round synthetic, and a rigger for fine lines and details. For my first wash, I will be using the mop brush and I will start with the boat on the left. I'm going to make it blue. It is a pale mix of cobalt turquoise and buff. The first boat that we did was very pale and I want to add a bit of color to this example. So I will paint the side of this boat with almost pure ultramarine. Please remember to keep the wash watery to be able to blend it with the water reflection later. I want to have a lot of dark water around the boats. Just going to pretend that there are a lot of other objects like buildings and jetties around that would cast this reflection. So I am premixing a big puddle to do this. To paint the larger reflection, you need to stick to the same principles. To connect it all to the boat and make decisive brush marks. It is harder in this instance as the shape is larger and the mix is drying as we speak. And you cannot really pre-wet or spray this area to keep it moist for longer, as it will destroy the sharp edges that we really need. I'm going to make the second boat orange. I want to show you the blend of colors in between the boat and the reflection, as it's not that obvious with the blue boat on the left. So there is same process here. I'm keeping the wash fairly wet and now I will be connecting it to the water reflection. The orange part is a bit too dry, so I'm going to add a runny orange mixture on top of it again. Quite happy with this now. I'm going to add a few red stripes wet on wet for soft edges and call the first wash done. The first wash is fully dry and I'm ready for the second one. I've changed the brush to medium synthetic as we will be painting much drier and smaller shapes. When I paint objects in shadow such as this, it is crucial to make as little brush marks as possible. Otherwise, your darks will look overworked. And please don't confuse adding texture to the darks with dabbing. When all the darks are finished, I usually add details, bright colors and the darkest darks and lightest lights. In this example, it's just stripes on the side of the boats and ropes. I usually use the paint straight out of the tube. This way the paint is the richest in hue and value. And the sketch is finished. This is it for today. I hope it was helpful. If you like this tutorial and want to see more of my videos, please like, subscribe and share. And I will look forward to seeing you in my future videos.